So today we're going to use Photopea and we're going to create a new document by going to File and Open or File New. I always go down to the Photos tab and I'm choosing 8 by 12 because that's copy paper size. These are all paper sizes that we would use in printing in the classroom. 300 pixels per inch is good for your DPI. And I would title your work ahead of time. I'm going to call this Miss I Test. And the background is white, and that's fine. So I'm going to create. Anytime that I want to change the orientation of my document, right now I've got a vertical orientation. I'm just going to go up to the image menu and transform it by rotating it 90 degrees either way. So that can be done at any point during building any file that you're working on. So now I've got a horizontal if I want it to go that way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our background layer, and we're going to fill with the gradient tool, which is the box that goes from white to black. If I want to customize my gradient colors, then I can click on my foreground color. That's going to bring the color picker out. And I have to click the OK button first, not just X out, because otherwise it won't change. So that's my darker color. And it's going to change from that one to the new lighter color that I chose in the value box. So make sure you click OK. And now I can do the same with the background color. The gradient is going to typically blend two colors together. That's why you can change both your foreground and your background color for this fill. So use the hue slider and then click somewhere in your value box and click OK. And I also have some options for the gradient tool where I can choose presets or just stick with my custom colors that I just set, but any of those presets are fine. And I can also change the shape of my gradient: linear, diamond, angle, reflected. Blending modes we can keep the same for now. And you can change your opacities, and you can also reverse. But keeping it at 100% is okay. So dragging your gradient across, clicking and dragging, will fill your background with your two colors that you chose. And if you don't like the way that pulls, you can go in a different direction and drag it and drop it in another way until you like whatever combination you get. So we're looking at the layers palette here, and there's a whole bunch of layers tools down at the bottom that you're going to need. We've got a trash can in case we want to drag any layers to the trash to delete them. We have the new layer button, and that's going to allow me to add some empty layers above my background when I click on that, and I'm going to drop in about 3 or 4 of these layers here. And we're going to use effects on our layers, also known as layer styles. And eventually we will use adjustment layers and some masking for other assignments down the road. But for now, I just want to make sure that I click on my next layer. Any layer that you've clicked on and turns dark gray is the active layer. That's where the work is happening. So I always tell my students to check what layer it is that they're doing their work in. Keep your eye on your layers palette. And we're going to brush in both layer 1 and in layer 2. So you've got some brush sizes to change. You have a soft brush, you have a hard brush. So you can slide the hardness up and down. You also have some custom brushes that you can work with as well. And just for contrast, I'm going to change my color to something a little darker and okay that. And I'm just going to fill with some drawn lines across my gradient. And I'm making sure that I'm doing that in layer 1. So think about the elements of art like line, shape, contrast, pattern when you're doing this work. And then I'm also going to do some brush work in layer 2. So just to be different, I'll change to a different color here, maybe something a little lighter. And okay that. And maybe try a different kind of brush as well. So now I've brushed in both layer 2 and in layer 1, and they're both sitting above my gradient on my background. And we're going to do some effects. And if you go to blending options, you're going to get the menu that have all of these other options underneath, but you'll get to preview them when you choose blending options. So these are going to make our layers look a little bit more three-dimensional, and you can use them in any combination you want. So I like to use drop shadow, but click on whatever variety of blending options that you want and see what it does. So I've got a little shadow. It's popping out my lavender lines. It's making it look a little bit more 3D. Sometimes those blending options really radically change the colors that you're using. I'm going to uncheck that because I really liked my lavender and I want to bring that back. But you can really use any of these in any combination that you like, and then make sure you okay it. And I'm going to do the same in layer 1. So you can also get the blending options from the layers menu up here. It's exactly the same thing. It's under layer styles. And again, you can choose the blending options. That menu is going to come up and you're going to get the same ability to preview all of the blending options. Next, we're going to bring in a picture, and I'm going to make sure I'm right in my layer 2. And I'm just showing you here that whatever effects that I've added, when I bring them, drop the layer down, it shows me exactly the names of those effects that I used for both brushing in layers 1 and layer 2. So to bring in a picture, first we really need to go to Google Drive and we need to open a picture. So when I go to my drive, I'm going to look in my photography folder. And I know I have a lot of stuff in my composition folder that I've been photographing and uploading. So I'll go to my point of view folder. And I like this picture of leaves, so I'm going to make sure that gets downloaded. And I've got to go to the upper right-hand corner to hit the download button. And it's going to automatically go in your downloads folder. But again, if you want to specify a particular folder that you're going to be putting your downloaded work into, then you can change it. I have a folder on my desktop that I called school stuff, or you could name it photography, whatever works for finding things is up to you. So now that is saved on my desktop, downloaded from my Google Drive. And I'm going to go back to photopea.com. And this picture is going to get brought into my test file that I'm working on here. So I need to go to File and Open. And I need to navigate to my school stuff folder that I'm keeping on my desktop, where all my downloaded stuff I've specified to go to. And I know my low point of view picture was the one I wanted to open. And slowly Photopea is loading the picture that I want to open. So don't be alarmed if your painting disappears. Everything is really tabbing out at the top of Photopea here. So my test file is there. My image that I opened is up right in the next tab over, just like all your internet tabs will tab out as you work in your browsers. And now you can drag the layer and touch the tab of the file that you want your picture to drop into. That's one way to bring an image into another document. Another way is to go to the select mode and select all, or hit Control A on your keyboard. Now I have these marching ants that go around the whole edge of my image, and I have to copy by going to the edit menu and copy, or Control C on my keyboard. That's going to copy everything inside the selection. And then I need to click back over to the painting document that I made and go to edit and paste, or Control V to paste the image in. So my picture is in there, but don't worry, because all of my other stuff is still there. I can see it in the layers palette. And you can change the size of this image. So any layer can get changed in terms of how big or how small that layer is. I'm just going to the move tool here because that will allow me to push the image around if I need to. And oops, I accidentally made a copy of this and I don't want it, so I can click and drag that to the trash. So now when I go to edit, to change the size of any layer, you want to free transform it. That's going to put a bounding box around the entire image, and I can see that this picture is a little bit bigger than the 8x12 that I made the new document, and I can resize it however small or large I need it to be. I hold my shift key down on my keyboard and I use just the corner arrows. That's going to keep everything in proportion. If I use the top or the sides, it's going to distort the picture. So holding shift and using just the corners keeps everything in proportion without stretching your picture at all. And then I need to make sure I click the enter button to get out of transformation mode. That bounding box will disappear. And that means I can go on to the next step. So clicking the enter button after you free transform gets you out of transformation mode. So now I'm ready to go on to the next step. So we're going to use some selection tools, and there's a variety of selection tools in the third, fourth, and fifth position of the keyboard. Oops, I didn't mean to stretch that, so I just want to go back and edit, step backwards anytime I make a mistake. And here's my selection tools here. So you can use the lasso tool, or we're going to the object selection tool. And when you right click on any tool that has a little white arrow, it shows you all the tools that are hiding underneath. So underneath object selection is the magic wand. You could use the rectangular marquee or any of the lasso tools to select as well, but the magic wand selects by color, and we'll go with that one today because the goal here is to cut out different chunks of color from your picture so that your painting comes through. So as soon as I click on some blue, the selection tool is going to find the colors that it thinks are similar. And I'm going to hit the delete button so that I start cutting out bits and pieces of this photograph. And it can be in whatever random order that you want. So I'm just going through and clicking on different colors here and deleting the areas of the picture that I don't want in there anymore. So if I click on dark pixels, the computer is going to try to select something it thinks is similar. And delete or backspace will cut that right out. So go around your image and select and delete until you see a whole bunch of your painting coming through. Oops, and if you go way too far, then we know we can always go back to the edit menu and step backwards. All right, much better. So this was definitely a tricky picture because there were just so many values of green, but I cut out a bunch more here. And the thing I'm going to look for is just if there happens to be any little selections left. It's very, very tiny. I'm going to go to the select menu at the top of the Photopea screen, and I'm going to deselect. There's that tiny little selection right here. We got to get rid of that because we don't want to continue to do work just in that selection. So again, select and deselect will allow you to get rid of any selections. Sometimes they're so tiny you can't even see them. And now that's going to allow us to go on to the next step because we want to apply a filter just to this picture layer, which happens to be layer 5. So we're going to the filter gallery, and there we're going to be able to preview all the filters that you kind of see in the rest of this menu here. I was using a filter earlier called Glowing Edges, but you can click on any of these little samples, and I'm just zooming out so I can see more of what's happening to the entire picture. But any of these filters will preview as you click on them. And you can change the parameters with the sliders depending on what the filter is, and I'm just going to OK. because I like the stained glass effect. And so there's my stained glass. And so the very last step is bouncing into layer 3. And we're gonna right click on the gradient tool because that's where the paint bucket hides. And we're gonna grab the paint bucket, and your foreground color is the one that your paint bucket uses to fill. So if you need to change that color, then go ahead and change your paint bucket, change your foreground color so that your paint bucket will utilize that new color. Click OK. Make sure you're in layer 3 because that's where we want to do the paint bucket fill, and you can click anywhere in the document as long as you're in the right layer. Don't worry if your entire image disappears. We can see that all the layers are still there. They're just covered up by an opaque layer 3 that has a paint bucket fill. But we're going to change the blending mode, and that's really going to change how the entire image looks here. And by default, all of your layers are in a normal blending mode, but when you drop the menu down on a particular layer, you have a whole variety of like 20 different blending modes here. So you have to try them out and see what they do. They're really all based on what your picture or what your individual layers already contain color-wise or value-wise. But the more you click on the different blending modes, the more you'll figure out what they do. So some of them don't do a whole lot, depending on whatever is in that layer. Sometimes dissolve doesn't do much, but as you click through, test them. Darken is changing it a little bit here. I use overlay a lot, and some of them will change your image just slightly, or sometimes it changes very much. Things like difference, exclusion, subtract, and divide will almost make your image go from negative to positive. That's kind of dramatic, so I think I'm going to keep a difference blending mode in layer 3, and I can see everything that is underneath now. So now we want to save these, and it's good to go to File and Save as a PSD. That's going to be a Photoshop file. That is going to retain all of your layers. So you can open them back up and continue to edit the individual layers if you need to. In an emergency, if you can't save it as a PSD, you can always export it as a JPEG. But keep in mind that exporting as a JPEG is going to flatten all your layers, and you won't be able to edit them. So saving as a PSD is probably the best thing to do most of the time. It's definitely going to give you a bigger file, but you have the flexibility to go in and change those layers. So again, anything you save as a PSD file is going to go in your downloads folder unless you specify elsewhere. Now, I already named this Miss I test, so it's good to go and download it and get it saved. But if you haven't changed the name, then title your work here, and it's a good idea to put your name in the file. So if you don't want it to go in your downloads folder, you can click in another area that you are organizing your work in. Again, I put my stuff on the desktop in a school stuff folder. And hopefully I'll see that download in the lower left. So we want to drag everything that we save into our Google Drive. And that way it's going to be that much easier to add it to Classroom. So I already made a folder in here specifically for this assignment. And these are some files that I was working on. So I want to open up my folder so that I can actually drag that downloaded Photopea file into Google Drive. And I know I named it Miss I Test, so I'm going to grab it and just drag it in. Make sure that you see the plus copy so that you know it's going to upload into your drive. And you may just want to check in your lower right-hand side to see that it's actually uploading into Drive. All right, there it goes. All right, I'm going to keep that because I have similar named files. So just double check to make sure that that's actually going into your drive. Sometimes when they're really big files, they might take a little while. They have a lot of layers in them. They're PSD files. And that's it. Now you're ready to drag all your finished work into Google Classroom.